Hello Summoners, and welcome back to another episode of ProGuides OP Pick or Ban, now on patch 11.4. These are champions that are a little bit overtuned for one reason or another, so they have the power to affect your games more than they otherwise should. In light of that, you'll be either wanting to deny their existence altogether, or go ahead and secure them for your team. And one quick thing before we get started. For the guy who made fun of my Adam's apple in the last video, you know Kangas is bald, right? Let's jump right into it. Yeah, I said what I said. Starting off things in the top lane, we'll start off with everybody's favorite champion to hate, DARIUS. With lane priority being much more important than ever with the new emphasis on ganking junglers and early game skirmishing, lane bullies will play a huge role in the meta, and DARIUS is the meanest bully of them all. Due to his overpowered trading in lane, able to solo kill as early as level 1 if his opponent overcommits to a fight, most laners give DARIUS complete control of the lane, which gives you pretty much permanent priority. Whether he's dealing with ranged top laners, melee carries, or tanks, DARIUS can pretty much overpower any lane opponent. It's just a matter of using your abilities at the right time for the matchup. For example, if you're against an immobile champion like Maokai, you can sort of just ghost to run him down once he's overextended, you to pull him in, and then beat him down until he wastes flash or dies. But against an opponent with more tools for escaping like Camille, you want to wait for the right time and the right place. Camille can buff her CC with her E, meaning that if you pull her, but her hookshot is still traveling to the wall, the ability will still drag her away after the fact. So, in a specific matchup, you'll want to ghost at her, slow her with W, and stack up your passive. Instead of pulling her in early, you'll want to use it after her E starts pulling her away. We aren't going to go and do a rundown of every single matchup, but those are just a couple of examples on how you may need to switch things up. Lane matchups aside, just as a general guideline, don't look to teamfight without having your summoner spells, or at the very least, your ghost available. No matter how fed you are, you're easily kited without that extra movement speed. As I said, DARIUS is everyone's favorite champ that they love to hate. He's overbearing, there's no clear counterplay in almost any matchup, and with the power of Ghost and Stridebreaker, his one weakness of being kited is completely eliminated. Yet he somehow never seems to be nerfed. On the contrary, there are some champions that have been bad for just as long or even longer, yet never seem to get any love. So, today's question of the day is, what champion do you think is completely awful but never gets buffs? For me, it's Tahm Kench. Released Tahm Kench is my favorite champion of all time, but due to his prominence in pro play, he's gutted to the point where he just hovers around 40% win rate. He needs that mini rework fast. Let us know your answers in the comments down below. Our second pick is Riven. She's one of the hardest champions in the game to use to her fullest potential when talking about her from a mechanical perspective. But once you master every combo and animation cancel, she's nearly an unstoppable force, being one of the few champions that can truly 1v9, largely thanks to the massive buffs to her E that she got in patch 11.3. In lane, your cooldowns are much longer than later down the line, so your trading has to be much more calculated. The general rule is to never overcommit. Most of the time, you'll use your Q to go in, W to stun your opponent so they can't trade back, and E to back out safely. Only use your E aggressively when you're absolutely confident that you can win the trade by a large margin. Trading aside, E also gives you a safe way to farm, able to walk up to the wave and dash back out if your opponent steps up to punish you. It even gives Riven a way to deal with ranged top laners like Quinn and Vayne, thanks to the shield. Once you have your ultimate, your lane strength really starts to pick up, but generally speaking, you shouldn't try to use your ult for the 100-0 all-ins. Since your ult is an execute, you want to take a couple of trades first to get your opponent slower. After you do, look to force the fight and finish them off. When it comes to the teamfight, you'll be surprised how durable Riven is. Despite building nearly pure damage, the combination of healing from items and shielding from your E and Seraphs makes Riven an insanely hard to bring down target, as long as you aren't chain CC'd. If your opponent has strong lockdown, consider picking up a QSS and building it into Silvermare Dawn over a Kempuck Chainsword as your last item. Looking now at the jungle, the meta has shifted pretty heavily. Power farming your camps is still a viable strategy, but due to lower gold and experience, you're not gonna carry nearly as hard. As a result, junglers that can gank early are back to being top tier picks. With his fast, healthy clear, and his easy ability to shove laners back into his teammates, Hecarim is able to farm hard and gank often, meaning that he'll maintain his spot as a top tier jungler even in this new pool of junglers. His Q and W give him fast and healthy clear, allowing you to clear out your side of the map and either look for a gank, or if that's not an option, quickly seal away opponents' camps. When it comes time to teamfight, W's aura makes you nearly impossible to bring down, as long as your teammates keep pumping out that damage. This allows you to build a mix of damage and survivability, giving you the damage threat of any other bruiser, but leaves your opponents feeling like they're trying to bring down a full tank like Ornn or Malphite. When you're looking to gank, you'll want to use your E to close the distance, but don't just ramp into your opponent. Use blue smite to get even more movement speed, slowing them in the process, and then run behind them to push them into your team. Once you have your ultimate, this is even easier, as you ult behind them, ferrying them backwards, and then shove them even closer to your teammates for an easy pick. In teamfights, you can use the same tactic, using your ultimate to split up the entire enemy team, and then using your E's charge to further isolate the carry that you're targeting. Our second pick is a jungler that is only playable in gank heavy metas like this, but when she's good, she's really good. Rek'Sai's ability to gank from almost anywhere and any angle means that playing against her means that you're gonna probably be under your tower, but sometimes that's not even good enough. Her Q gives both insane clear speed and high DPS when dueling champions, and when it's combined with her E, gives her insane dueling power. Just be sure that you're getting off all your autos so you can quickly fully stack your Fury before you use your E. While the tooltip says that it's doubling the damage, since it converts it to true damage once the bar is completely full, it's doing a lot more than that, allowing you to tear through even armor stacking opponents. When playing Rek'Sai, you'll want to make sure that you keep the tempo turned up to the max. As soon as you're level 3, you should be looking to gank. Don't stop at getting a flash out of your opponent. With your ability to tunnel straight over every single wall in the game, you should be repeat ganking over and over and over again, securing a huge lead for your laner while tilting your opponents out of the game. This is probably the only time I'll say that having tunnel vision is a pretty good idea. Rek'Sai does have a pretty huge fall off point in the later stages of the game, but that's assuming everybody is on equal footing. You should be winning the early game hard and using that early lead to snowball so far ahead that you can forcibly close out the game before you even reach that point. If you struggle to establish that early lead or have trouble using it consistently enough to close out your games, you should head on over to ProGuides.com. Between our courses and our top tier coaches, we have plenty of resources that can help you with all that and so much more. And there's no better time than now because we're running a huge discount. Now until the 20th, use the discount code RANKUP2021 for 20% off the ProGuides sub. Next, looking at mid laners, we'll be starting off with Pantheon. The next shift in the jungle meta doesn't really affect champions in that role. It has some indirect effects on what's best in lanes too, with mid lane being the most affected, since Prio in the mid lane affects both fights on the top and the bot side of the map. With his ability to pressure his laner and set up his jungler for free kills thanks to his point and click stun, Pantheon, who was already strong before, is a huge pick on this new patch. With its cheap cost and low cooldown, his Q gives plenty of pushing power, and even gives you some poking power if your opponent chooses to stay back at range. When trading in lane, you want to make sure that you're playing around your E's cooldown. While you should win most trades with an empowered W into Q alone, your E makes it so that your opponent can't trade back, even a little bit. And it's not just for 1v1 trading either. E's invulnerability is what makes Pantheon so disgustingly strong in a 2v2 mid-jungle skirmish. No matter how much damage the opposing pair packs, if you're the one that they're focusing, they can't win. Once you have your ultimate, you can start looking to pressure other lanes. Even with his E being nerfed towards towers, you can go ahead and still look to force dives with your teammates. Our second pick for the mid lane is Viego. Being a resourceless champion with innate sustain is never healthy for the game, and even with some nerfs targeting his sustain, he's still an extremely dominant pick. To be honest, I didn't even know he got nerfed. His Q is his bread and butter, giving you all the wave clear and healing that you could ever need. It also gives you powerful trading power if you ever get close onto your opponent, but you're probably just trying to survive the lane until you reach level 6, where you can look for all-ins with your ultimate. W's dash gives you a way to reach your opponents, with the stun allowing you to quickly burst them down. Just remember that only the mist stuns, and it only stuns one target. Trying to use a dash in a minion wave to stun your own opponent will result in you sliding forward and taking a bad fight. E's attack speed gives them even more damage to your trades, but the most important part of the ability is the massive cloaking field that you get for navigating teamfights. Since it lasts for 8 seconds, there's no need to rush things. Take your time to look for an angle, and then jump on an isolated opponent and pick them off. Your ultimate is much more than securing last hits, it's also a pretty OP mobility spell. Use it to chase your targets after they flash, even if it's over a wall. Once you get the kill, use your ultimate resets to keep up the chase. Sometimes you don't even need the other abilities of the champions to take over. You just need that extra ult cast to get onto your next target. Looking now down at the bot lane, we'll be starting off with SERAPHINE. Since mid laners with stronger early game capabilities are more of a thing now, we think putting SERAPHINE on a role that generally takes more time to scale anyways is a better option. That way you can go ahead and scale up to the role of a teamfighting monster without tilting your jungler off the rift. In lane phase, you can look to poke opponents with your Qs and Es, but unless you have an overwhelmingly stronger 2v2, which you usually don't as Seraphine, you should probably keep the trade short and focus on farming up to team fights, since that's where you really start to shine. Once you get the legendary Moonstaff combo of items, your goal is to group up and force fights every time that you can. This doesn't mean run mid and do the classic NA ARAM, but rather, make sure that you're taking fights for objectives when they come up. While your Q's low cooldown means that you can pretty much spam it as much as you want to dish out some damage, your E has a longer cooldown, especially early game, so be careful about wasting it. Since W is the most broken of your 3 basic abilities, be sure that you're always casting it with the echo portion of your passive available in team fights. Doing so is basically the equivalent of casting a Redemption, Shirelia's, and Locket of Iron Solari, all at once, but on about a 12-second cooldown once you stack up the ability haste. One last thing to talk about is your ultimate. While the term positioning gets thrown around a lot in League, it's super important to set up a good spot as Seraphine. With the right angle, you can land a massive 5-man charm without ever putting yourself on the same screen as the opposing team. Since it's relatively slow moving, the best thing to do is wait until the other team overcommits to a fight, preferably in an area without a lot of room to dodge, like a choke point in the jungle. Just wait a few seconds until they funnel in, and then let it rip. Our second pick for the bot lane is KAISA. Despite receiving a nerf to her Q, she's still going to be an incredibly strong pick. Since this build drops the collector, it's more about her auto-tagged DPS and less about her Q anyway, so you'll feel the nerf even less. Even though she's a scaling hypercarry, KAISA has some pretty nasty trading in lane, but only when you're committing to a long trade, enough to get your full passive off. If you can't do that, either because you have a passive support or the enemy bot lane is too strong to make it worth it, feel free to farm up and scale safely. While you're lucky enough to have an aggressive support, try to position so that you're always ready to fight. When you're going in for the trade, you'll want to stand away from the minions so that way as many of your Q missiles land as possible. You'll also want to stand at an angle that allows you to shoot your W at the target, but just remember, W may also have a fat hitbox, but it travels super slow. So it's only really worth shooting it when the opponent is locked down by your support. Use your E to dodge skill shots or to close out the gap between you and your opponents, but remember, it locks you out of your auto-attacking animation for the cast time, so don't make the mistake of using it in your opponent's face. This will leave you open to being hit without the ability to fight back. The ability becomes truly OP once you evolve, with the stealth being able to give you a way to break your opponent's ankles and outplay your foes in ways that other ADCs simply cannot compete with. Once you have your ultimate, you can commit a lot harder into fights. Whether you need a dash to follow up an engage that you couldn't reach normally, to follow a flash of a fleeing foe, or you just need that shield to win a duel. KAISA's ultimate in conjunction with her aforementioned stealth make her an incredibly strong self-sufficient hypercarry that can shred through any opponent, squishy or not, and still keep herself alive without needing the handholding that other marksmen require. Now for our supports, we'll start off with THRESH. Even without any buffs, THRESH always finds his way back into the meta, and at this moment, he's standing above all the other picks in higher elos. Both his skill floor and skill ceiling are relatively high compared to the other champions, so your success on him is largely tied to your mechanics. But once you master him, you'll be able to carry games hard, even from the support role. His Q's ability to make picks from pretty long range gives you the option to play for picks, but if your opponent are just playing to their minion wave, don't be afraid to walk up and just look for an E. Make sure that you're doing this when you're 100% confident that you can go ahead and force fights. If you walk up and can't make anything happen, you're just going to be taking a ton of damage for no reason at all. If you're unable to look for aggressive trades, THRESH is also able to be played as a much more defensive support as well. Maybe you have an ADC like Kate that prefers to poke from range, and the enemy bot lane has something that can only go aggressive, something like, I don't know, Leona and Tristana. In that case, you want to position between your carry and Leona, and look to flay Leona back every time that she tries to go in. Once you get into teamfights, try to think about what your role is. With this super versatile kit, THRESH can do a lot. If you have a fed immobile carry like Ashe, and the enemy team has a diver like Zac, you may want to go ahead and sit on your ADC and flay Zac out of his jump. But if there's no real backline threat from the enemy team, you may choose to target their front line, or even look to flash on the enemy's backline to lock down their carries for your teammates to kill. One thing to be super mindful with THRESH is your lantern. Just as it's frustrating to have a teammate that won't click your lantern that can save their life, it can be really frustrating as an immobile carry to have a THRESH that doesn't really position well with their lantern ready. If you're dealing with champions that can't be peeled like Olaf with his ultimate, or your opponent has something like Jarvan ult to lock down a mobile carry, your lantern can make all the difference in the result of a fight. Rounding out our list for OP picks, we have Rell. Rell is everything a tank should be. She doesn't do a lot of damage on her own, but instead focuses on providing a metric ton of utility and CC for her teammates to lock down foes. When laning, you want to be a little bit cautious about going too ham on your trades. While landing your CC means that your ADC will be able to get a good amount of damage, missing your W leaves you wide open to receiving a lot as well, since you're massively slowed when you're not in your mounted form. Oftentimes, it's actually better to play Rel in a more passive manner, using your Q for a bit of poke and sustain, and waiting for your opponents to make the first move. Once you try to go on your ADC, use your E to stun them, and then chain your W with that to get a guaranteed CC. Once you have your ultimate, your peeling ability gets even stronger, forcing your opponents to try to deal with you before they can reach your carry. Since Rel is more about her CC than dealing a ton of damage, she shines a lot more in teamfights over 2v2s. What Seraphine is to enchanters, Rel is to tanks. Once you reach the teamfight stage of the game, one thing that you can keep in mind is that due to her W's sluggish cast and short range, Rel is much better at following up an ally's engage, or counter-engaging when the enemy team goes in. Just be a little bit patient and look for the right window of opportunity before spamming your abilities. Good timing is the difference between carrying your team fight with CC and being the reason that your team ends up fighting 4v5. A couple tips before we go. First, remember that your Q is a shield breaker. Even if it only hits for a small amount of damage, it will always fully remove any shield from an opponent. This is especially good when playing against Morgana, since you can go ahead and remove her black shield before chaining your CCs together. Second, if you're serving as a primary engage for your team, you may have to consider picking up Shirelia's or Turbo Cam Tank in order to allow you to fight.
Look, I've been begging Kangas to just play Rel or Thresh in our games, but he just straight up refuses. I mean, if you could all just spam Kangas play tank in the comments down below, it would really save my mental and his gameplay. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and join our community Discord through the link in the description down below. I can't wait to see you guys in the next video, but until then, as always, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.
Okay, Nate's got small biceps, take 4.
It's not true. It's just the camera angle. It's the lighting.